Hey everyone, welcome to the HTML workshop. This is a beginner level workshop, so it will work best for you if you do not know HTML or if you know it a bit and want a refresher. We will post the recording of the workshop after it ends, and we will also have a handout we will give out. So don't worry if you miss something or forget it after the workshop. So, some software you may want. The software is not necessary during the workshop, but if you want to create a web page for your project, these are some good choices of what to use. So what is HTML? HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language, and it is the standard language used to create web pages. Hypertext is text that links to other text or other web pages. So basically, hypertext is just links. A markup language is a language used to display text, images, and other content. So HTML is a markup language that can display text, images, other things, and can also link to other web pages. And a ton of HTML pages make up the World Wide Web. Creating an HTML file. You are not required to follow along with this. This is just useful information. So in whatever editor you are using, you need to create a new file. You save it as whatever you want it to be. You should choose index, and at the end put .html. This will let your computer and everything else know that it is an HTML file. And to open your web page, you find the HTML file in your File Explorer, and you open that inside your browser, for example, Google Chrome. The document object model. The document object model is a tree of elements that make up an HTML page. As you can see in the picture, within the document, there is an HTML element, which is the root element. Then there is the head element, which contains metadata, and the body element, which contains all of the visible parts of your web page. Every web page should have these first few parts of the DOM tree: the HTML element, the head element, and the body element. In the center image, you can see what the code looks like for these few essential elements. On the first line, the doc type HTML, that basically says, this is HTML. Under that, you have a head tag and a body tag wrapped inside of an HTML tag. What are tags, you may ask? Tags are what enclose content in HTML. There will be an opening tag before the content and a closing tag after the content. There are some exceptions to this. An opening tag will look like what is on screen. It will have the tag name inside of angle brackets. And a closing tag looks like an opening tag, but with a slash near the front. The opening tag, the content, and the closing tag make up an element. So here, you can see that there is an opening head tag and a closing head tag that creates the head element. There is a body opening tag and a body closing tag that makes up the body element, and so on. It is best to indent your tags with the tab key that are inside each other to make your code easier to read. An analogy for the structure of tags is a sandwich. You have the bread encasing the whole thing, and this is like the body element. Inside the body, you have all of the important bits of your document. This is similar to all the fillings of a sandwich. Then you may also have a different type of bread within the sandwich, which encases its own stuff. This is like a container tag within the body of HTML. Inside the head element, you have all of the metadata of your web page. This can be your title. Maybe you would want an icon and web page styling. Styling is done through CSS, which we will cover later in this workshop. Inside the body element, again, you have all of the parts of your web page that will be shown to the viewer. You have paragraphs or plain text. You have headings, which are typically used to display larger text, like a title. You can also have line breaks, images, links, and divs, which are containers that contain other tags. And finally, this is not all of the tags that exist, but finally you have script elements, which contain JavaScript code. We will briefly cover JavaScript later. Attributes are properties of HTML elements. They can give elements other properties that can be useful. On screen there, the bolded parts of the examples are the attributes. So inside the A element, you can have the href tag, the href attribute, which is a hypertext reference attribute, and it links to another web page. An image can have a source URL, and any element can have a class attribute or an ID attribute, which helps with formatting. So now I will show a very, very simple project. We will call it Team Trees 2. So on our webpage, we will have a spot to donate money, a thank you card from the website, and a link to the real Team Trees. On our webpage, $25 plants one tree. We're kind of running out of money. We can't do $1 one tree anymore. As a note, the code itself in these slides are not extremely important. You don't need to look at it too closely. The example project is just to show you very simply what you can do on a web page. So adding elements to our project. On the left here, you can see some HTML code for our project. All of the HTML tags we added are next to the bracket on that screen. And also, you can see on the right that we have everything we wanted. You have a place to donate, a thank you card, and a link to the real Team Trees. You may notice something, and it is that this website is incredibly ugly. And to fix this, we turn to CSS. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. It is used to style a web page and make it look nice. At the bottom left, there is DuckDuckGo without CSS. It is just an ugly list of stuff and not much unlike our Team Trees 2 project at the moment. And then next to it, you have what the website looks like using CSS, and it looks much, much nicer. To add CSS to your web page, within the head tags, you add some style tags. Within these style tags will be all the CSS you use. In the black background there, you can see the format of CSS code. You have a selector, which selects what you want to format. After it are curly braces, within which we write what styling we want to apply. So in that example, we set the color to be red. CSS selectors can have many formats. You can have an HTML element, for example, a p tag, a div tag, and this will select all of those elements inside the entire file. To select a group of things like specific things, you can have a class selector. To select a class, you write a period and then the name of the class. You can also select elements of a specific ID denoted by a hashtag in front of the ID name. And to select multiple things, you just add commas between them. Now, there are a ton of CSS properties. Properties are used to just style whatever you want to style. Common ones include color, width and height, margins and padding, the border around an element, and the font size. Almost all HTML elements follow the CSS box model. So with a box model, there is the content, which can be your text, your image, whatever. Around the content, there is padding, which has the same properties as content, for example, background color. Then there is a border, which just puts a border around the padding. And finally, there is a margin, which spaces elements and has completely different properties. So now we will go to style our project. We add a ton of CSS or styling to our project, along with some edits to the HTML to make the CSS work. The styling we add is shown on the left, but again, you don't need to read it closely right now. It isn't especially important. You can review it after this workshop if you want. The thing to notice is that our webpage displayed on the right looks a lot better now, and it's just done through the power of CSS. However, there is still one more problem with our webpage, and that is it doesn't actually do anything. When you try to donate money, nothing happens. The thank you card doesn't change. The trees planted number doesn't change. It doesn't say the money donated. stuff like that. So to fix this, we turn to the last subject of the workshop, which is JavaScript. JavaScript, abbreviated as JS, is the main programming language used on websites. What it does is it brings functionality to your web page. It can make things move, make things change color, modify the entire HTML structure, and it can listen for events, for example, key clicks, mouse presses. It can also send data to a server and retrieve it as well. Variables in JavaScript are things in the code that hold a value. You declare a variable by writing var, then the variable name, and following that equals and the value you want to assign it to. There are a couple other ways to declare variables. For example, declaring a constant, which can never change after you declare it. The value of a variable can be a plethora of things. It can be a number. It can be a string, which is like a piece of text. It can be a Boolean, so true or false. It can be an object or a function, and it can also be some other things. Functions in JavaScript are like a set of procedures you want your code to do. So the syntax of a function is on the screen there. You have your function name. Right next to that, you have parentheses and any parameters you may want inside those parentheses. Finally, you put curly brackets after it, and inside the curly brackets is all of your code. There are many built-in functions to make your life easier when writing JavaScript. There's some on screen there, and many, many more, some of which we have in our handout. Callbacks. Callbacks are JavaScript functions that react to something in the document. They react to things that happen when the user interacts, such as clicking on something, hovering over something, or maybe just when something is loaded. These functions are called callbacks because the function is given to an HTML element at an early time, and the element, quote unquote, calls back on the function to run when it is deemed appropriate, such as when the element is clicked. Finally, an important part of writing JavaScript is commenting your code. Comments in code are pieces of like plain text that you, the reader or the writer, can read. But comments do not change what the code does. Comments allow yourself and other people to read your code better. To make a comment, you can put 2 slashes, and anything after the 2 slashes on that line will be a comment. You can also have multiple line comments between those characters, the slash and the asterisk. You can also use comments to have some code temporarily not run. So at the bottom there, the console log function, since it is a comment, it will not run at all. And this can be useful for when you're doing things like testing alternate code or debugging. So using JavaScript, we can now add functionality to our project. First, we add a callback to the button within the HTML itself. Furthermore, we put some script tags and a function inside them. The function will have the same name within the button and in the script tags, and that makes sure it actually happens. Inside the function, you have stuff that is going to happen whenever the button is clicked. We then add some code inside our function. Again, it isn't too important. The point is that what the code does. What the code does is that when you donate some money, the thank you card will show the money you donated and the number of trees that you planted. This solves our problem from before. It adds functionality to our web page. But of course, JavaScript is not limited to just changing text on a web page. It can do tons and tons of other things. For now, we will add a couple more features to our code. First of all, we want to make the thank you card invisible at first and make it appear once you have donated. You can see that in the bottom left. And next, we want to make it so that the thank you card has some pictures of trees. The number of pictures is equal to the number of trees you just planted with your donation. So at the right there, you can see the thank you card popping up once you have donated, and it has 4 tree images for the 4 trees we planted. So all in all, through that example, I hope you learned what combining HTML, CSS, and JavaScript does. HTML brings structure to the web page. It's just what is shown. CSS brings a little structure, but mostly it does styling and makes the web page more beautiful. And finally, JavaScript brings functionality to the web page. These 3 languages make up all web pages on the web, and they make the whole thing work. Now, as we near the end of this workshop, I would like to talk about some other tools you may want to use. So one of these is developer tools, which is also known as inspect element. In the past, you may have used inspect element to do something like make your grades seem different on whatever web page you use to view them, but it can also be very useful while creating a web page. Through inspect element, you can see the CSS that is attached to the HTML or the CSS that is attached to a specific element. You can also view the console, which has logging information and error information about errors that have happened. Developer tools can also tell you about requests coming in and out of your web page and more. Publishing your web page. So once you have created your web page, it sits in a file on your computer, but of course you want it to be shown to other people. One way to publish your web page is through GitHub, and there will be instructions on how to do this in the handout after the workshop. Finally, here are some further resources you would want to use while learning how to create web pages. W3 Schools is a great resource to learn how to use CSS, HTML, and JavaScript. The Mozilla developer documentation is the official documentation of everything web related. And then when you have a question about something during the hackathon, or maybe when you're creating web pages in the future, so during the hackathon, you can ask a mentor or search it up on Google. You should try searching it on Google at least once, as if you continue programming, you will need this skill a lot. While creating web pages, oftentimes the top search results will be from w3schools.com, developer.mozilla.org, or from stackoverflow.com, which is like a question and answer site about coding. All right. Thank you for coming to this workshop. In the future, we will be releasing the recording of this workshop, and on screen there is a link to the helpful sheet we created about HTML. I will also put this link in the chat and links to other things as well. Thank you. Hi, Skylar. Do you have a question?
Hey, so I contacted you earlier.